So, very good evening to everyone. And my name is Vivian Chong from STM-KL Center, and I will be your moderator tonight. So, we welcome you to What Has the Church Got to Do with Mental Health webinar. And we want to welcome Dr. Hera Lukman, who will be speaking to us today. So, let me just turn to Dr. Hera here. And we all know her credentials is long, and I don't want to go into each and every one of them. And I have two questions, very quick, and just to ask her to talk about herself. Number one, Hera, would you like to just tell us about your professional background and why you got into this particular field?
Hi, Vivian. Thanks for having me tonight. In short, I'm a psychologist. I'm a health psychologist. I'm often mistaken for clinical psychologist or even a psychiatrist. But in short, I'm a health psychologist. I promote mental health awareness, and that's one of my main role as health psychologist.
Good, wonderful. Well, thank you. We're certainly glad and looking forward to what you're going to say and going to share with us tonight. So, second thing is, I know you've been very passionate about promoting mental health awareness in churches as well. And what do you find most challenging in initiating or creating this mental health awareness, particularly in a church setting?
Well, I think first of all, let me say that the responses has been very, very positive, right? So my encounter with Christian communities has always been very positive, and they are very eager to learn. And people around whom I have connected with, are very teachable. Uh,
Mhm.
Having said that, of course, we all have our perspective, and we come in with a perspective that we know for a long time. So I think one of the main challenges that I experience working not just with Christian community, but with any community, is to get people to broaden that perspective and to take perspective from another person's point of view. So that's something that I think we all need to work on. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I certainly think so. I'm glad actually you accepted the invitation to come and talk to us. This is really a much needed area, and we all, like I said, we really need to increase our understanding of mental health and our literacy.
Okay. Right. I'm really excited this evening to be part of this initiative that SDM has done, and it's a conversation that we all need to talk a lot more on. And so, I think that poor mental health is part and parcel of life. And, the question is, what are we going to do about it as individuals? And tonight we're going to talk about what the church is going to do about mental health. So to start with, though, I thought that I would share a few things that I hope to achieve by the end of tonight. Mental health is a vast field, and we can talk a lot about mental health. And with the limited time, there's just a limited amount of things that we can talk about tonight. So at the end of this evening, I really hope that all of us can start having conversations, genuine conversations about our struggles, right? All of us, as Vivian said just now, all of us struggle with poor mental health at some point of our life. And I hope that this evening, will get us all thinking as to how do we destigmatize conversations on mental health and become more open with one another to have this dialogue on mental health. And secondly, I hope that this evening will get us all thinking and recognizing that the church has a significant role, and the role of the church is the function of the church in helping with mental health care is significant. And that's something that I really want to stress this evening. And of course, we can start thinking about what we can do as individuals and as churches to provide care. We can start even now, right? So that's the scope of this evening's talk. So as such, there are three different segments to today's talk, and as Vivian has asked all of you to put your questions in the Q&A box. But I must apologize in advance if for some reason your questions are not answered this evening for whatever reason, due to time or any other reason. But I must emphasize that all your questions are very, very important to us. And even though tonight we may not be able to address your question, I hope to address it in some other platform. So do keep them coming. All right. Okay, so why don't we just start this evening by looking into the definition of mental health. And if you look at the WHO definition given here, you would realize that mental health is all about our general well-being. It's about our potential. It's about our productivity. It's about how fruitful we can be and how much we can contribute to the society, the community around us. It has actually, if you look at the definition, there's nothing said about an absence of mental illness. So it doesn't mean that, someone who is mentally ill cannot have good mental health. And it doesn't also mean that if we don't have a mental illness, we have very good mental health. So I just want to sort of clarify the relationship between mental health and mental illness. They are in different continuum. So we have one continuum, then that is mental health continuum. Some days we are flourishing. Okay, so we are up here. Yeah, we are having good day, we're having general well-being, we feel good about ourselves. But there are days that we are down here, we are languishing in mental health, and we don't really feel very good about ourselves. We don't seem to be productive as we want ourselves to be. If you ask me, it also fluctuates from moment to moment. Like, for example, now I think my mental health is rather poor. As I was telling the panelists, I think I'll be up here again, right after this session. So that's just kind of like, my personal experience at the moment. There is also another continuum, is the mental illness continuum. They are both related, but they are not the same thing. So people do have mental illness and they live with mental illness, and there are others who are not diagnosed with mental illness on the other hand. So let's look at this group of individuals who have they're not living with mental illness. So let's think about the situation right now, pandemic. The pandemic has been with us for many, many months, and it's taken a toll, right, on most of us. And I'm sure you have friends and family members, who share with you that they are not feeling that great. Okay, so everything seems to be gloomy, everything seems to be not as bright, and people are becoming a lot more anxious. Right, they're not sure what's going to happen. They're not sure even whether the vaccine is going to work. When people say that with vaccine we have more hope, and people are not sure about it. Right, so there's a lot of anxieties around. So individuals without mental illness, so people who are not diagnosed with mental illness, can be having languishing mental health given a certain circumstance like the pandemic at the moment. So a lot of us, if you ask us how we're doing, we probably say that, oh, we're just surviving. So we are down here in this box, right? Although we are not diagnosed with a mental illness, we are not feeling that great. But during the pandemic, I've been speaking to quite a number of people with mental illness. They are individuals who live with mental illnesses. Surprisingly, some of them were telling me that they're doing quite well during the pandemic. They feel as if that they are more productive because they feel that they prefer working from home, and they don't experience as much stress as when they were working in normal circumstances before the pandemic. And these are individuals who are diagnosed with mental illness, and they are in a way thriving at this time. So again, I think this diagram, what it's trying to show us is that every one of us can experience good mental health and poor mental health, regardless of whether or not we are diagnosed with a mental illness. But if we are to experience poor mental health, it doesn't always mean that we are having a mental illness. Let me just illustrate that with sadness. Okay, so for example, if we are sad and our sadness has all this quality that is in front of you here, right? Our sadness, the experience of sadness can be identified. We can identify that cause. For example, I feel sad because there are so many social gathering that I cannot be. I cannot see my loved ones. I'm from Canada, and if something happened to my parents, if they get sick, I can't go home to Canada to see them because of lockdown and all the other reasons. And that, in a sense, make me feel really, really sad about being away from them. And that sadness that I experience is a usual response to life challenges such as that. And I'm sure that it is very common to all of us nowadays when we actually listen to other people's experience as they go through the pandemic. However, such sadness is temporal. And when situations become better or more stable, this sadness will lift. And although while we are sad at that moment of sadness, there may be minimal effect on our functions. For example, it affects our sleep somewhat. It affects the way that we do things, our concentration. But in general, we are still able to function on a day-to-day basis. So that kind of sadness is an experience or a sign of distress. It is an experience of poor mental health. However, there is also another kind of sadness that has quality like these. Individuals may feel sad, but they just cannot pinpoint the reason for their sadness. So, for example, even before the pandemic, there are individuals who are feeling some some kind of dread, right? They couldn't explain why they feel so sad. And to them, it's an unusual response because everything else around them, right, it seems to be going okay, and they don't seem to be able to identify what is the trigger. So and also because they are asking themselves what's going on, because this sadness has been with them for quite some time. You're talking about weeks, months, or even years. The sense of dread, right? Now, if you have that kind of experience, that kind of sadness, it's understandable why that kind of sadness can significantly affect functionality. Individuals with that experience of sadness can experience difficulty to do the daily things. Okay, and so that might be a symptom of a disorder if you have this kind of sadness. So therefore, if it is a symptom of disorder, we must investigate to see if we have a mental illness. So poor mental health is not the same as having a mental illness. Now, I just like to sort of say, if you or any other individuals that you know, anybody that you know, have a kind of sadness, it could be sadness or equally applicable to anxiety or anger, right? So if the quality of those experiences is found in this column, then I would highly recommend that, that you either accompany the person or you yourself go and see a professional. A good place to start is to go and see a GP, a general practitioner, right? There is no harm. Just go visit him and tell him how you have been feeling, okay? And let him guide you as to what is the next step. The next step could be that, he could explain to you, oh, you're having poor mental health. Or the next step could be that, you need further investigation, and he might send you to another specialist to have a look, right? So just leave him to make that decision. So the good step to do is to see a general practitioner first. So this evening, I thought that, I would like to focus on 4 facts about mental health. Fact number 1, poor mental health is widespread and it is increasing. This is happening worldwide. In Malaysia, 1/3 of individuals 16 years old and above experience poor mental health. And this figure is increasing at least from 1996. And most recently, if you want to look at the number of individuals with depression in Malaysia, that number amounts to about 500,000 people, 2.3% of the adult population. Our young people are not doing too good at either. 1 in 5 are depressed, 2 in 5 are anxious, and 1 in 10 experience stress. And these young people are also at risk for suicidality. The incidence of suicidal behavior is also rampant among the young people, and it is actually increasing in time. Now, even among the best of us, we are not spared from poor mental health or living with mental illness. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Lifeway. Lifeway is a Christian research organization in the US. And in their survey of 1,000 randomly selected Protestant churches, 23% of pastors responded that they have personally struggled with mental illness of some kind. So as you can see, I repeat again, fact number one, mental health is rampant, it's widespread and it is increasing. Although that is the case, majority of individuals who struggle with mental ill health, they delay in getting help. Now, that is a real problem. And there are many reasons as to why people delay in getting help. Stigma is one of the predominant reasons to the delay in people getting help. Of course, there are other reasons like, their lack of access. So people do not know where to get help, how to get help, or maybe resources of help is limited in that particular community or particular country, right? And also one of the bigger thing about people delaying their getting help is because in the past they have negative experiences while they try to get help. Either they are ridiculed or they feel worse about it, right? So there are many reasons stopping people to seek the help that they need. But stigma remains the predominant reason. Now, this phenomenon of stigma that stop people from receiving the help that they need is not a new one. WHO has come to know this phenomenon for some time, right? Although treatments are available, stigma and discrimination and neglect literally prevent individual from getting the care and treatment. I'm just wondering in 2020, how is the situation? Has the situation improved? I think that we are talking more about mental health related issues, but till today, I think that stigma still stops people from getting the help that they need. We need to do a lot better in reducing stigma. So what is stigma? I think it's really, really important for us to understand this bit. Why is stigma reducing, right? The probability of people to seek help. Basically, stigma is about shame. Shame is a very painful emotion. It has to do with rejecting the self, condemning the self, because one thinks that they are not worth the uh, the attention, they're not worth being around with. Okay, so they have this self-condemnation because something that they see in themselves is flawed. And because they have this self-condemnation, uh, they also think that others will reject them. So they also experience other condemnation. People who experience shame usually find themselves in this cycle of shame. When they feel shame, they think, they have thoughts that they are flawed. And because they are flawed, people should reject them. And their thoughts give rise to very unhelpful behavior. And some of this behavior, for example, avoidance, okay, avoiding to get help, avoiding telling others, that they need help, withdrawing from people, being angry and blaming themselves and others. All this behavior in turn affect how they feel about themselves and increase the degree of shame that they experience about themselves. So, how does stigma develop? How does it develop? Now, it's really quite important for us to understand how does that develop. Now, this development of stigma, unfortunately, is under our conscious awareness. So the whole process is very implicit. Unless we talk about it, unless we call it out, unless we analyze it, it's going to remain very automatic to us. And it's going to be remaining under our consciousness. Let me just take you through very briefly how stigma develops. Stigma developed from stereotypes. What are stereotypes? They are just a generalized belief about a group of people, like group of people who are mentally ill. So one of the example of stereotype belief is that people with mental disorder are weak. Now, I think that we often hear this stereotypical beliefs, right? And this belief is definitely not true. It's not true for all who are experiencing mental disorder. Maybe some, but not everybody with mental disorders are weak. And because it is not true in most cases, this misperception that we encounter on a daily basis in our conversation, and of course, in the media is a huge culprit in perpetuating misperception about mental health. And so if we listen to it and we talk about it often, these generalized beliefs become true to us, although it's a misperception. And once this belief is internalized, we start thinking and feeling a certain way to people who have mental disorders, i.e., we become, we actually engage in prejudice. So, for example, if you believe that people with mental disorders are weak, then you tend to think and feel this way about them. If they can just be stronger, they will not have mental disorder. And thoughts and feelings give rise to how we respond to individuals living with mental disorder. We tend to blame the person for not being strong enough or try hard enough. Because if they do, then they can get rid of their mental disorder. So this is how stigma is being developed. Stigma is not only developed by other people. In time, individuals who suffers from mental disorder experience what we call self-stigma. They internalize that generalized belief and start believing that they are not strong enough and therefore they have mental illness and that they need to be stronger and try harder. And if they can't, they will blame themselves and start, using derogatory term, uh, to sort of blame themselves for not doing better. So we can understand how stigma is stopping people, is delaying people in seeking help because nobody wants to be associated with stigma and its associated consequences. So some of you may ask me, what is the average of delay then? How long do people take before they get help? If you're interested in any of these, because I'm trying to go through the slide, in time, I have references underneath some of these slides. I don't have time to cover in great detail today, but you can access those references using the reference I've given you on the slide. Okay, but for today, I just want us to sort of look at the last column. WHO did a study looking at the delay of seeking help among individuals who suffer from common mental health disorders such as anxiety disorders, mood disorders, and substance use disorders. And they looked at 15 countries. So it's a cross-country study. They look at these 15 countries from developed and developing countries. And this is what they found. The range of delay in seeking help for anxiety disorder, for example, is 3 years to 30 years. So some countries has, much longer delays than other countries. But I think that the key to focus on is that the delay is long. You're looking at years rather than days or months, right? And the delay is longer when we look at men compared to women. The consequences of delay is dire because when there is delay in seeking help, the condition that the individual is suffering from becomes severe. It doesn't only become severe, it become more complicated as the condition perhaps have other condition that comes with it, so coexisting conditions. All right, and all these uh, um, um, basically make the individual difficult, as they live through life, right? Their negative social and occupational functioning that is being affected. The longer that the delay is, the more functionality that can be affected. And more importantly, there's an increased risk of suicidality. So therefore, the key is that the earlier someone seek help, the better for everyone. Now, so far, fact one and fact two are kind of gloomy facts about mental health. Fact three is a little bit more positive. Now, what fact three is saying is that faith community promotes mental health. So if anyone find themselves or have a community where they can have meaningful relationship in that community, where in that community they can feel accepted, and whereby they can contribute towards the community, then individuals with such community will have better mental health. So in other words, mental health is better among individuals in conducive community, not just any community, it's faith community. So this is good news. Now, the positive relationship between religion and mental health is nothing new, right? You read articles like this that tells you that, hey, religion is actually good for mental health. When you read articles like this, the next time and every time you come across such article, know that the data is not plucked from thin air, right? There is a long, period of study in this area, and the relationship between religion and mental health has been an interest to the scientific community for some time now, since the 1960s. And recently, I think what is quite interesting is that if you want, you can read more, go to theosthinktank.co.uk and look at the study that look at the last 30 years of studies looking at relationship between religion and well-being. And what they found is this: belief alone is not as strongly correlated with well-being as social and personal participation activity. What it means is that, if we do faith as a community, if we involve ourselves in the community to participate in communal activity, right, to pray together, serve God together, have this communal contribution, that is better with regards, to our mental health, as opposed to doing faith alone. So faith is not just a cerebral action. We need to be able to involve ourselves in living with one another and doing faith together. And it reminds me of the greatest commandment that the Lord Jesus gives us: love God and love man. And these two are from the same coin. It's a two-sided coin. You cannot have one without the other. Okay, so we're now in fact four, which is another positive aspect of mental health that I want to cover today. Fact number four: faith community is recognized as first responders. Now, what do I mean by that? It's because people with struggles in life, for example, mental health struggles, they tend to go and share the struggle with faith community first before they approach health professionals. And this unique position of faith communities are picked up by many health organizations, including the American Psychiatric Association, who even created a guide for faith leaders. You see, the position is so strategic that APA is trying to work in collaboration with faith community to provide better mental health care for all. So therefore, as I cover the four facts on mental health this evening, I think that there are two messages here. The first message has to do with the extent of mental health problem. We have a serious problem with mental health in the whole society. The second message is that the church has a unique position in providing mental health care because the church is a faith community that we can promote mental health, and faith community is the first to know about struggles of mental health. So if you ask me, well, if church is in a unique position, then many people will be able to, feel free to come to church and, seek help, or at least, share with somebody to journey alongside them. Things are not as straightforward. Okay, so as we look at Lifeway Research again, I'm so sorry. I wanted to use more local data, but I don't know of any. So if you know of any, please do share. Right. So if you look at the Lifeway Research again, the Lifeway Research is Christian research organization in the US. They survey different groups of people, asking them whether they agree or disagree with this statement. If I had a mental health issue, I believe most churches would welcome me. Now, if you look at this data among those who never attend worship services, so these are individuals who don't go to church, right? They seldom go. 55% of them, they disagree with this statement. In other words, they don't find that churches would welcome someone with mental health issue. So more than 50%. And I thought that, maybe individuals who regularly attend church would have a much better response. But look at this figure. At least 1 in 5 individuals who are regular church attenders, they also disagree that church would welcome someone with mental health issue. So this is something for us to think about, right? And Lifeway did another study that is very recent, and you can read all these studies. Yeah, it's very interesting to read. It just gives us an idea of people's perception, about church. And Lifeway did the study and asked individuals who have had a family member or close acquaintance taking their own life in the past. They asked this group of individuals this particular question. During the months prior to death, who was aware of his or her struggles or risk of suicide? And the response is actually very telling. Very few of them noted that church leaders and church members knew about the person's struggle before their suicide. Okay, you may think that, family members and friends would know more, wouldn't they? But look at this figure. It is also very low. In fact, majority of them either do not know of anyone who knew about the person's struggle or are not sure. So that is actually very telling, right? Although church should be a place that can provide good, better mental health, and the church is a place where someone could share about their struggle because we are supposed to be the first responders. But that in reality, that's not really showing us the case. And I asked all of you to fill up some questions, right, on Mentimeter. And I'd like to go to one of the questions and to see how you responded to that question. So let me just get to that right now. Thank you so much for every one of you who have responded to this question. Let me just go to this question, right? I asked this question, someone with mental health challenges will feel safe sharing his or struggles with me. That means with you as an individual. And will they feel safe sharing his or her struggle with Christian communities? And this is the result of all individuals who are participants today, right, in this session. These are the results. So as you can see, the figure is not very high, right? So perhaps, more people are somewhere in between that they think that, okay, so you see 59 of them, right? And 54 of them is somewhere here. But yeah, okay, so people can actually share their struggle with me. But when it comes to Christian community, the curve seems to go, more strongly disagree, right? So this is showing us something. This is indeed showing us something. And we have to think about this question. Is church a safe space for people to share their struggles, not just on mental health, but on their struggles per se? So therefore, I think that, as a church, we need to do better. We need to start to take that, our role properly, and we need to start working on reducing stigma, because all the data seems to be pointing towards the fact that stigma is still very present in our current society, in our current thinking, right? And so we need to fight stigma a lot more vigorously. So the way I look at it is that, in order to fight the stigma, in order to do better, we need to understand our role. Now, as first responders, we are in a very good position to dispel misunderstandings, reduce stigma, and facilitate access to treatment, right? And we are in a really good position to do that. However, in many, many instances, we are known to hinder the process of people getting treatment rather than facilitate this process to get them to feel better, for the following reason. All right, that APA is showing us. For example, and I quote, at times, religious concept and understandings may be a source of hindrance or resistance to treatment. People may depend on God for healing or regard receiving psychiatric services as a lack of faith. They may interpret their symptoms as a curse or a punishment from God. So our interaction, right, the church interaction with individuals who are struggling with mental health is pertinent, is paramount. We either facilitate them getting better or we hinder the process of our brothers and sisters getting better. So this is again food for thought for us. So I think we need to start to look at what church is not and what church is. So let me just begin what church is not. For us to do better, we must accept that church is not a diagnostic center. The church is not a treatment center, right? So a lot of time in our enthusiasm to help, in our real good intention, and I believe all of you who attend today's session, you have the best of intentions. And I'm just so glad to see so many of you here tonight. You have the best of intention, right? And you know that a lot of people have the best of intention. And in our best intention, sometimes we get over enthusiastic in terms of, trying to explain someone's mental health disorder. We try to sort of give a cause, or we also try, in addition, we try to sort of provide a prescription as to what they can do or not do so that they can become better. And that's something, as I said, very good intention. But as a church community, we tend to sort of focus more, right, on the spiritual dimension. So our diagnosis and our treatment tend to focus on spiritual related items. So for example, as a diagnosis, for example, that, you may have mental disorder because there may be certain sin in your life that you have not confessed. While that is true, that may not be the only thing. And then, we could also prescribe several things, as good intention, describe certain things. Maybe you should pray more. Maybe you should confess more. Maybe you should read the Bible more. Come to prayer meeting more. Those are all good suggestions. And I am an advocate of spiritual life. I'm an advocate of spiritual betterment. However, we must remember that the cause of mental disorders is multifactorial, right? And let's avoid the over everything, right? Let's avoid over spiritualizing, over medicalizing, over normalizing, and over everything is from your childhood experience. Because when we do that, right? We are providing a very simplistic and glib, a blip response to those who are suffering from mental disorders. And sometimes this can be very unhelpful. So, and also, individuals with such with such struggle can become very dismissed, very misunderstood, and very alienated as a result of our very simplistic way of trying to help them understand why they have mental disorder and what they actually can do. So I would ask that, we remember this again, that we are not, the church is not a diagnostic center. We are not a treatment center. And the church, above all, is not a substitute to medical care. We are not and should not be in competition with medical care. But what is the church then? The church is a soul care center. Right. Why did I say that it's a soul care center? Actually, church is not just a mental health care center, it is a soul care center. We need to look at the welfare of an individual in a holistic manner. We mustn't just concentrate on spiritual health of the person, we must concentrate on personhood health, the holistic health of the individual. And if for that individual, medication is part of their treatment, part of what would help them, then the church should facilitate medication taking, and we shouldn't be hindering them to take medicine. And of course, while looking at the whole holistic health, we need to also bear in mind that we need to work in collaboration with other professionals, not in competition, but we need to work in collaboration. And so, therefore, we must work as a soul care center. The church is a soul care center. Of course, as individuals experiencing mental health problem, they medicine alone is not sufficient. Okay, so they need more than medication. They need more than mental health care. What they need is actually a redemptive and safe space for recovery. The church is supposed to be a redemptive and safe space for their recovery. And what I mean by that, I think Reverend Professor John Swinton, practical theologian, put it very, very nicely. He said that in the context of the church, recovery means enabling people to experience shalom, enabling people to experience that place where you are in right relationship with God, where you have support and people around you, and where even in the midst of your deepest storms, you know that you are safe. And that's how he described the church to be a redemptive and a safe space for recovery. I'd just like to share that the journey of someone who struggled with mental health problem is a long and windy road. It is not a straightforward road. And remember what Vivian was sharing right at the beginning. There is no quick fix. I would love it if there is a quick fix because then the suffering can be reduced significantly. But the reality is that most, if not everybody who struggles with mental health problem has a very long journey. And the journey is a journey that is filled with ups and downs, twists and turns, full of times of darkness and times of desert. It would be really, really nice to have someone actually walk with you when and if you are in such a circumstance. It would be nice for someone to walk from point A to point Z with with you, So now, medical professionals can only walk with them during moments, perhaps, of making sense and diagnosis of what they are experiencing, perhaps during treatment. But the church is called to do far more than that. The church is asked to go with this individual, to walk alongside this individual from point A to point Z, from recognizing that they may have a problem, from accepting that they may have an illness, from trying to get their heads around all the different kind of treatment that they need to have, and that their life is going to be a new normal. Now, making sense of suffering is something that the church ought to walk alongside that individual, and not just that individual, but also their family members or friends affected by their suffering. We often neglect carers. The church has a responsibility to walk with a person suffering from a mental health problem and their loved ones. Making sense of suffering is a lonely journey. And, it's a journey that is so difficult to take. Sometimes it takes longer than just a few months to make sense of it. Sometimes we don't get an answer, we get silence. Can the church be a place to help people make sense of suffering? Can the church be a place where individuals in this state can hear, you are heard, you are loved, you are not alone? The church is a redemptive and safe space for recovery. In this redemptive and safe space for recovery, the church need to bridge, right? To be a bridge to the wounded healer, Jesus Christ, who came to suffer not only for us, but with us. He's familiar with suffering. The church need to walk alongside individuals to help all of us actually make sense of what Christ is saying to us. What did he mean about the fact that in this world we will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world? What does he mean by that? And what does he mean when he said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness? The church need to be a bridge to the wounded Savior, wounded healer and Savior. As Henry Nouwen put it so elegantly, a Christian community is therefore a healing community, not because wounds are cured and pains are relieved, but because wounds and pains become openings or occasions for a new vision. Mutual confession then becomes a mutual deepening of hope, and sharing weakness becomes a reminder to one and all of the coming strength. In Christ Jesus, suffering takes on the possibility of liberty rather than imprisonment. The church need to be a place for soul care. The church needs to be a redemptive and safe space for recovery. The church needs to be a bridge to the wounded healer, Jesus Christ. So, what can we do now? Which is our last segment, right? What can we do now? Actually, there's so much you can do as a church and as an individual. So, let me just suggest a few things before we end, right? Churches, wherever you are, I think that you can drive dialogues in small communities, dialogues about vulnerability, not just about mental health, but vulnerability, right? Dialogues about it, dialogues about suffering. But pertaining to mental health problem, if you think that I don't know how to start a dialogue in small group, what kind of material am I going to use? Well, I'm recommending you a fantastic material, right, from the Century course, and the website is here. So you can actually take down the website, go to the website, and obtain this wonderful material. There are many sessions here, and they do have videos, and it's like a handbook, right? And I believe that this is a wonderful, wonderful course for any one of you who would like to start a conversation, start talking about mental health. Now they make this Sanctuary Ministry, which is based in Canada, make this free of charge when pandemic hits. Before pandemic, it costs it costs quite a bit to get this course, but now it's free of charge because they're dedicated to talking and increasing mental health literacy among Christian communities because they deem that as one of the most important things that we must do as a church. Mental health struggle is not an individual cross to carry. It is a communal cross for all of us to carry. So I hope that you look into that and see whether you can use that to help you drive dialogue in small communities. As a caveat, please do not have a specific group saying that, okay, we are going to have this group to deal with mental health problems, right? Because that can be very stigmatizing. Get the dialogue to start in ministry groups, existing ministry groups, prayer ministry, women ministry, man ministry, youth ministry, just a few people coming together and having dialogues about mental health. The second suggestion is, have more uh, topics, right? Preach more and do more Bible studies relating to mental health struggles. Now, why do we need to do this? When we look at the research by Lifeway again, right, what is happening is that the church, people who are suffering from mental health disorders and their families would like the church to talk more about mental health. But in reality, if you look at the figures here, majority of the churches only talk about mental health once a year, rarely or never. I actually asked you the same question, and I'm just, I just want to sort of go to our Mentimeter right now and have a look at your response. Okay, so have a look at your response, this group's response. So this is the same question, and it's very similar, isn't it? That majority of us, we only hear uh, sermons relating to mental health in our church once a year, rarely or never. This is the majority. So what is this telling us is that we must do more talks, more preaching on mental health related topics. The more we talk about it, the more we can reduce stigma and make that topic less of a taboo to talk about. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Just. Okay. And churches could also conduct mental health literacy sessions. You can collaborate with other churches, or especially with individuals, Christians who have background in psychiatry, psychology, counseling, come together to provide mental health literacy sessions, right? So I think there are some churches who are doing this already. And if you want a very quick look, right, you can start with this handbook if you like. Or they are, for example, I actually run, a monthly session on mental health literacy, and for people just to talk about it, right? You can sort of, if you like, you can check it out and see whether you want to join us next year. You can, right? But this year is almost done. Okay, so that's also mental health literacy program. But as an individual, I would like to encourage you to be a champion of creating this dialogue spaces. Get together with some people that you can talk with, right? And start this dialogue. Be a champion, either in your community or in your church. It doesn't have to be always your church, but church is not subjected to the building, right? So come together and start that dialogue. Be a part, or if you're not, comfortable to champion that dialogue, be a part of the dialogue. But make an intentional decision to journey with someone, right? As I said, the journey is a long journey. Make an intentional decision to love that person, walk alongside that person, try and understand that person. And as you do so, remember to be equipped, because journeying with somebody, especially if that somebody is wrestling with mental health problems, is not something that we do without, without much sort of equipping. We need to be equipped because best intention or good intention is not enough. We need to know how to effectively help this individual. So be equipped. And, if you are someone who is struggling with mental health now, I would like to sort of ask you to think about reaching out to someone that you trust, someone that you can walk with. Reach out to them and ask if they could journey with you, right? So you could also do that. And those of us who have background in psychology, psychiatry, medicine, or counseling, get involved in helping to equip. So there's so many things we can actually do. So what has the church got to do with mental health? If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. Now you are the body of Christ and individual members of it. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. May the Lord teach us how to be a church who can walk alongside someone who suffers. Thank you so much. I just want to give the time back to Vivian. Maybe we can address some of the questions.
Thank you very much for this session. It's really wonderful. Okay, so I think yeah, I see that we have many votes for a few questions here, and I think it's essential for us to go through some of them because of time constraint. Yeah, and let me see. How do you think the church can create a safe space for individuals to share about their mental health struggles?
Yeah, I think I had a look at some of the questions very briefly. I think that this question covered
Mm,
quite a few others as well. Um, I think that there are a lot of things that we can do. But one thing we must remember is that, a safe space is about mutual sharing. It's about, mutual hearing and listening as well to vulnerabilities. So if I'm the only one sharing my vulnerability, then I feel as if that I am the one with the problem and that everybody else is okay. And in time, I don't think that that actually creates a safe space. A safe space is not only a place where we can just share, our personal struggles and get people to listen to our struggle, but it's also a space where we realize that we are in a similar journey as another, also wrestling, struggling, asking the same question, having similar struggles. That makes this a space a lot safer. Of course, the other thing that is more difficult sometimes to achieve because we have a very normal tendency to judge, you know,
mm,
we have a
mm,
tendency to be a solution bearer and problem solver, right? Because I think that it's not because people are judgmental. It's not about that, but it's because you know uh, people with good intention want to help, and if they
mm,
cannot help, they feel very uncomfortable. You see, it is about our own anxieties, and if we cannot help someone, we feel bad, and that feeling bad drives us look for solutions, look for reasons, and
mm,
in our quest for that, sometimes we can come across very judgmental, very problem solving, not listening, and so on and so
mm,
forth. So I think these are the two things that I mentioned. To have, that's why it's a culture change, right? It's not something that we can do immediately as a matter of following instructions. There are certain changes that must happen uh, first, starting from ourselves. If we want to help someone in their vulnerability, in their struggle, we must be prepared to share our struggles as well, to sort of level the ground, right? We are not up there helping someone down there. We
mm,
are
mm,
equal. We are all equal in God's eyes, no matter what the circumstances, all of us do struggle. We may be struggling different things, like, for example, someone may struggle with mental health problems, another person may struggle with other non-mental health related, but it's actually a problem too.
mm, mm.
So I think that's important to start with. So
Yes.
we're not creating safe space to treat and fix people. That's not a
Mm,
safe space.
okay. So if I hear you correctly, yeah, so the best place or what you're suggesting is ideally to have a group of people where you form into a small community of your own in a friendship circle. It's often the best starting point as a safe space.
Yes,
A friendship circle, I find it's the most rewarding and meaningful. I'm not. It's not the huge number of friends, but it's a very close knit a community.
absolutely. I think that, if you can start with friends circle, that would be much easier to start with because all of you know each other well. You'd be surprised, how many of our friends are struggling with mental health problem, but never told us anything about it.
So,
That they are suffering in silence, and no one knows, right? You'd be surprised that there are people in our friendship circle who
mm,
are really, really struggling. And
yeah.
so I think it's a really good idea to go to, I keep saying about the Century course because it
Mm,
is systematic, it sort of help us understand what mental health is. It start, it start us with conversations, and they literally guide us in how we could start conversations. So if we are a
mm,
bit lost, we could actually just go to that material and
mm,
use it to start something,
mm,
because as we start, you may find yourself not even looking at the Century material but
mm.
going into the conversation, because starting is tough.
Yes, yes,
Once
I
you get
agree.
started, then that's great. But I think it must move beyond the friendship circle,
Mm,
because it's not the friendship circle that people find difficult to share.
mm,
The stigma doesn't come too much from people who actually
yeah.
really can hear you out. The stigma is largely also the church as a whole.
Mm,
So we
mm,
must move beyond that small knit group,
mm.
right, into the larger church community. So,
Right.
in other words, to reduce stigma from pulpit all the way to, you know, to friendship circles.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think, yeah, that is, yeah, start with a circle and then to move it to the larger community. And I think that will certainly be a very systematic approach of um, initiating this kind of conversation and dialogue. So, the second question I have here, I think it's similar. It's pretty much something that we have covered. Um, but I'll just want to see what you think, yeah? And it says here, pastors or church leaders I have encountered have generally refused to take mental health seriously, relegating them to spiritual causes, and thus refusal to make referrals to mental health professionals. It says, how do we begin to help our church leaders? And
Okay.
I think this is a very good question, and it's a very relevant question. Uh, yeah.
Okay, here here I'm going to do a very I'm really going to praise my home pastors and my church. Yeah.
Mm,
um I think um I think of course, anyone, as I said before, a lot of us find it difficult to take perspective, and sometimes taking a different perspective costs us something, right?
mm,
And sometimes we are fearful as what that cost might be. And understandably, we may have a lot of all those things working together that stops us from venturing into a different way of looking at things. So it is a journey, right? And it must start with a positive note. It must start with confidence and benefit of doubt for your pastors and church leaders. I think, as I said, the individuals that I come across, most of them, if not all, are very, very kind, compassionate, and they are loving people. The issue is about taking perspective. The issue is about learning together. The
mm,
issue is getting some of the misperceptions identified and sorted. uh, and that takes, and it should happen in dialogue. It should happen less in debates, because
mm,
when we
mm,
have dialogue, we are really walking together side by side.
yeah,
When you have a very combative and fake kind of atmosphere, then you are really in opposition, and that alone is already, having a negative connotation.
Mm, mm,
So, that's why I say it's a culture change. We
yes.
need to really shape the culture, and we also need to consider the communication that is going on, what is happening, in the way that we perceive other people. So
Mm.
I hope that this person who's asking the question, I get you, I hear you. It is tough.
Yes.
uh,
Cultural change is always tough.
yeah, it's always tough. And that's
Yeah.
what, I want to return to my experience with my pastors
Mm,
and church leaders. They have
mm,
always been very open. And I think that, to get the conversation going, mental health literacy helps to put things in perspective.
mm,
Oh, you
mm.
don't know what you don't know, right?
Yes.
And we can't expect people to know something they don't. We can't
Mm,
expect them to sort of take a perspective that they don't have.
mm,
So
mm,
therefore, in order for us to share our perspective, we need to have a good relationship first
mm, mm.
with people. And so I think that, that is definitely possible. Culture change is definitely possible, but it takes effort. It's not a quick fix again,
Six. Yes.
right? It needs to be built to pass.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when I hear you, this behavior science is telling us that 69% of the population, people typically resist change. So change is a big thing. Cultural change is one or other issues, and it takes a lot of time and efforts to actually break down and help them see the reason why. And of
Yeah,
course,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely, because I think that there's a lot of fear that we need to manage, right? And
Mm,
sometimes the fear sort of,
yes.
is understandable because they hold huge responsibility for
Yeah.
talk, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so their perception literally define how they respond to
Yes.
needs. And so
Yeah.
therefore it is important. If you are pastors, church leaders, I think you're the gatekeepers to how the church culture is. And so I'm going to just say, responsibilities lie first on your lap, and that's a heavy responsibility. And so I think that, we do need to have conversations among pastors and church leaders in order to make sure that the church has an effective culture.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think that that's really important here. So thank you. Let's take a look at our next question here. I have another question here. It says, in journeying with someone who struggles with mental health, what are some basic boundaries to set in place so the relationship remains healthy? I think this
Yeah,
is a very good one.
that's a very good question. And I think that, in any journey that we take with someone, there's always going, and I mean, you have to have boundaries.
Mm,
But of course, there is no set boundary for all of us to follow. It depends on the relationship. It depends on situation, and it depends on who this person is that you walk alongside, and many many other factors. But of course, we must have boundaries, and I think that the general boundary to have is, you mustn't think that you are. You mustn't have a savior complex.
mm, mm. Yeah, that's right.
That means I can do anything.
Well, I cannot do anything.
No, no, neither should you have a pauper kind
That's,
of,
that's
you know,
right.
you shouldn't have one or the other. I think that, the really difficult reality for mental health problem is that many mental health problem cannot be fixed the way that we think it could.
Mm,
Because,
mm,
we hope that this person will never be experiencing those symptoms again. We of course hope that no one will carry out suicide. Uh,
mm, mm,
and these are things that are very tough to prevent 100%, and to predict 100% in which way it would go. So don't have a savior complex. And whenever you have a savior complex, your boundary is completely destroyed.
mm,
So,
mm,
so whatever boundary that you create, make sure that your boundary includes that you
right.
remind yourself every single time. that
mm,
you are not a savior, Jesus is.
mm,
And
mm,
that and that there is a limit, and what are some of these limits that is realistic for you. You cannot cross that limit.
mm. Yes.
And the other thing is self-care. If you find yourself having mental health problem as a result of walking with someone with mental health problem, then you know that you have stepped over the boundary, because then you're not having good self-care.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I'm just looking down the list of questions here, and we do have someone who posed this question. And I think in part you had already answered some of these. Can you give us some ideas how to raise mental health awareness among the communities of believers? I think apart from talking about it and preaching in Bible studies and mention it regularly, uh, this person also asking where can we start, and maybe start with church leaders, but how? I guess yeah, you have already answered quite a bit. Do you have anything else to add on to this
Yeah, yeah, I think
question?
something is that, I don't think that you should wait for church leaders to start being involved. There are so many things. That's why I suggest that, you could champion dialogues among, people
Mm,
in your community to start with. It doesn't have to be church. It could be, the church, as I said, is not, it's not a building, right? So
mm, mm.
in fact, me and Vivian, we are part of the same church, Big C, and we could do a lot of things together. And so in a way, I disagree that only the pastors and church leaders could actually start something on mental health literacy. You can start something. You can just start the conversation with another person. You can
Mm,
actually start
mm.
journeying with a person that way.
Yes.
But making it intentional that, hey, you know what, we're going to try and talk through this mental health um, workbook that I've shared with you. uh, you can do that, and that is a really, really good place to start.
Mm. That brings me to just one question. How do we know if we are healthy enough to actually reach out to someone else?
You don't.
So I take it that I am, well, I am not imperfect, I'm not a perfect being either.
Okay.
So yeah.
Thanks for asking that question, Vivian, because it's really important. I think that I really want to speak to those of us who are experiencing mental health problem ourselves. We struggle. For example, I do struggle with anxiety, to be honest, right? I don't struggle with anxiety disorders, but I do struggle with anxiety, and the
Mm,
pandemic
mm,
is not helping. But as I struggle with anxiety, I think that I literally have lived experience of what it means to manage anxiety, and how
mm.
it feels like, at least. And there is no such thing as the fact that I must be healthy enough to walk alongside someone.
Mm,
In fact, if you have a lived experience of mental ill health,
mm.
of course the timing depends on how God would use you, and how you feel about helping other people. Again, we talk about boundary, right? You must be ready. But I don't think that you should wait until you're like 100% healthy or healthy enough, because there is no such thing. We always experience issues and problems and struggles on a daily basis. Life is messy, and
Mm.
that's the truth about life. And we can't wait until life stabilizes before we do things, and before we can flourish where we are. So
Yes.
mental health is you don't have to have mental health when you're all without mental illness. This is
Mm.
precisely what I'm saying, that we can be flourishing even when we live with mental health
Yes.
problem. There are many people with mental health problem who are contributing to the lives of others who are struggling with similar mental health problem, and they work together, of course, among other people in the community, so that they could also help them along. So again, if you go into the Century course,
Yeah.
there are people who are experiencing mental ill health, but
Mm,
they are
mm.
mental health advocates.
Right.
So you see
Right.
them in action,
Yeah.
yeah, while they're still living with
Yeah.
mental illness. So I think that's
Mm.
something really important. So for those of you who think that that you cannot serve, you can't do much
Yes.
when you yourself are not healthy enough, that couldn't be further from the truth. So,
So let me just look down the question rather quickly, and I have one question here: how to help reduce the stigma of seeking help for mental health issues?
well,
Yeah.
that's why it's a lifetime of
Yes.
work, right? And it takes from an individual to the
Mm.
community to the whole society,
Yeah. Yeah.
but we can all do our bit as individuals and as community to be very mindful about
Mm.
stigma. As you remember what I said earlier, that stigma development is under our awareness. So what we can do is that, from where we are, we can remind people if we hear a stigmatizing statement or something that is of a prejudice against individual with mental disorders,
Mm.
we can call that out. We can say, hey, you know what, I don't think that that is a fair thing to say, or I don't think that that is true. I think that, this is stigma.
Mm.
We have
Mm.
to call it out. But of course, in order to do that, we have to work as a community, right?
Yeah.
We've got to all have that intention and um, that alertness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and also a good communication and good relationship with one another in order to be able to call it out without feeling that, oh, I can't say that just in case I offend, people.
Mm.
I think that, as Christian community, we can be honest, and that,
Yeah.
we must walk the right walk. So
Mm. Mm.
therefore, we have to be a community that is much more than a Sunday, happy clappy community. We
Mm.
have to
Mm.
go deeper than that. We have to
Yes.
be in life messiness together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, and I think it's a really good point.
Allow me to come back to your point about listening. I just want to make
Mm.
a point, yeah. And some of us think that, I've got a lot of people telling me that, empathy is
Yeah.
something that some people have and others don't have. And it's completely not true. Empathy is something
Mm.
that we can develop. Any one of us can develop
Yeah.
and must develop. It is something that we develop rather than innately
Yeah.
present. So yeah, I just want to make that point. So everyone can learn how to listen
Mm.
effectively.
Mm.
So you don't
Yeah.
have to have a gift of listening. I often hear that, oh, I don't have a gift of listening. So don't talk to me. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's something, yeah, just sort of like to point out.
So to wrap up, do you have something for us to take away and something personal or something additional you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think that, this is just a really the tip of the iceberg. We're just really starting to um, just, mention
Mm.
mental health and the church. And I'm really, really excited about having much, more engagement with Christian communities.
Mm.
Because as you can see, our role is very, very significant. We don't only talk about treatment and diagnosis. We are really, really looking at the meaning of life. And I think it's missional for the church to really consider how we could walk alongside someone to make sense of suffering.
Mm.
So that
Mm.
is something that I'm excited about. And I hope that whoever is listening, and if you think that, you find it really, really hard in your time of suffering, and why, a God who is compassionate allows such suffering, I really hope that you could reach out to somebody that you could trust, and have this journey together. You don't have to do this alone.
Mm.
And there are people who care and love you, and just reach out, because we couldn't see what you're thinking, but I'm sure that there are people who would want to walk alongside you. And even if we don't know, right, how to answer many of your questions, or even take away the pain, but we would love to just journey with you. So I think that that's something that I would like to leave, the session with. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a very wonderful session here and having this conversation and also looking at creating awareness for the church. So you may exit the webinar once you're done. Thank you very much.